Hello everyone. All right, we are good to start. So we're going to talk about an intro to Azure Data Studio. Now, Azure Data Studio, for those who are, actually first tell you about me. I'm Heidi Hastings. I am Australian, hence the accent. I love all things ALM, DLM, all things Microsoft. Yep, everything from Office to Azure Data to Power Platform to automation to PowerShell to Windows to Surface and all the swag that goes with it. And I am certified in a whole bunch of stuff. I'm an MVP, MCT, but that doesn't really matter. It's what I can tell you about the tools. So who has heard of Azure Data Studio? What are you doing here if 3/4 of the room has heard about it? So today we're going to go through an overview of what Azure Data Studio is. I'm going to show you some of the little features, so code snippets, widgets, extensions, notebooks, and GitHub Copilot. And hopefully, while I'm going through the slides, my Azure Data Studio is connecting to my Azure SQL DB because I forgot to update the firewall rules for today. So if you want to get Azure Data Studio, the first thing you need to do is either have been installing SSMS for the last couple of years, and behind the scenes Azure Data Studio has been installed at the same time, or you can go to the Microsoft Docs page and you can download Azure Data Studio. Fun fact, Azure Data Studio has 4 different installers. So for those of you who are on restricted machines and can't get admin privileges, there's a user installer, so you can still install this. For consultants, this works a treat when you go to a client and they give you a laptop with no access to things. You can download the user installer and install it because it doesn't require admin privileges. The system installer is going to go across the board. You can also do the insider build, which is available on GitHub. Azure Data Studio being that open source tool that is cross-platform, so you can run it on Windows, Linux, and Mac. You can connect it to a whole bunch of databases, not only Azure SQL, SQL Server, Azure SQL Managed Instance, you can also connect to other tooling. I don't do it personally, but I know it's there. But if you want to use the insiders build, which is the one where they've already put the features in and they're going through beta testing of it, you can download that one from the GitHub area. This is also where you raise issues and feature requests if you want to make changes to the product. Or just wander downstairs, go to the Microsoft booth, find Drew or Aaron or Jerry, and there's a few of the other team members from the tools team who are here at SQL Bits, and put your feedback in directly. So a bit of an overview of what the interface looks like. For those of you who's used Visual Studio Code, it's going to look very similar because it's a forked code base. One of my favorite features about Azure Data Studio is it loads so much faster than SSMS. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got our navigation panel. So we've got things like connections. That's our connections to our servers. We've also got search, so we can search across a file system or folders or anything we've got open. And I'll cover off that a little bit. You've got notebooks, which is similar. If you've worked in the Python world, you would have had Jupyter notebooks. These are one and the same, except for they have the T-SQL engine. So you can do a notebook with T-SQL in it, which is not dissimilar to what the Python people have been doing for ages. Database projects are also available in Azure Data Studio, and if you work with database projects, they can work in both Visual Studio and Azure Data Studio. You don't have conflicts between the two. So if you're working with database projects and you open them in ADS, they will also open in Visual Studio. There's a couple of little properties in one of the files that changes between the two, but you can use both tools against the same database project. You've got PowerShell, one of my favorite things for those of you who work with Entra or Active Directory. You're probably often opening up a PowerShell terminal and being like, get AD user. You can do that straight inside Azure Data Studio. You've got the Explorer, which allows you to navigate the files you've got open or the folder you might have open. Source control, one of my personal favorite things to put in every single product in the world. This only supports Git. And you've got extensions. So this is the overarching interface that you're greeted with every time you open Azure Data Studio. You'll also see down the bottom left there, for those of you who can see it, I'll see if I can zoom in on it, this bit here, Azure. What that allows you to do is log in with your Azure credentials, and then you can start to see all the resources inside your Azure environments that Azure Data Studio can interrogate. So when you're going through that, I can connect to my various subscriptions. I can navigate through. I don't have to remember where my Azure SQL databases are. I can just connect, navigate through, double click, and it opens up a connection. You've also got things like keyboard shortcuts. So keyboard shortcuts is great when you want to know how to quickly and easily use the tooling. And you can search that shortcut window as well. I should pause this video. Let's pause. And what it's doing at the moment is the color theming. Another favorite thing, everyone loves dark theme, but who doesn't love customizing the theme to suit their needs? I often put this in high contrast because it works better for me, especially if I'm working at night. I don't like to stare at a white screen. Oh, this is fun. I hit pause, and it doesn't pause that one. Well, we'll just let it keep going. Actually, no, I will not let it keep going because it's going to start it from the start. I'll let it go in the background. It only goes for 3 minutes. So what it did show... Oh, now it swapped slides on me. Go back. Thank you. So what I didn't show you in that one, and it will show at some point, but you would have seen the terminal window pop up at the bottom. That's the PowerShell one, but you can switch that between PowerShell, Bash, and command line. You can't see it right at the moment because it's like 3/4 of the way through the video. That command palette that pops up, so when you hit Control-Shift-P, or down the bottom left, there's the little gear icon. You can go into that, and you can access the palette of commands. What that does is that little search window up the top changes to be a search of commands within Azure Data Studio. So that might be configuring properties. It might be adjusting something like the result set window automatically allows you to search, I think it's like 5,000 rows. You can increase that. It just means it has a bit of a performance hit to do that. Let's go into code snippets. So who doesn't love efficiency? I love efficiency when I'm doing code, and I often write the same T-SQL statement all the time. So what snippets allow you to do, and there's inbuilt snippets, if you start typing SQL, it'll automatically have that IntelliSense capability, and it'll list off a series of different things. So if you're often creating stored procs or views, this will automatically, you can just type SQL and you'll see this list. So say I'm going to create a table, I can hit create table, and then it'll give me an entire snippet with the drop if exists, with the select into, anything you want to do. So that right-hand side is the result of picking one of those snippets. Now these are the inbuilt ones. I can also customize it and do my own. So if I wanted to do a SQL snippet, I can go into the user snippets list and I say I'm going to add a SQL snippet. So I'll let that toggle through for a second. So you can see here we're looking at configuring the user snippets when it comes back. I forgot to put that in. I demoed it live. This is going to actually use one, and then I'm going to add one. So we'll just give it a moment while it adds them. So when you add them, you can add snippets in multiple different languages. So when you want to add a SQL snippet, you go into configure user snippets, then you'll go in and pick SQL, and then you're editing a series of JSON. And that JSON is a representation of the snippet itself. So you give it a name, you give it a description, and you give it an actual set. Well, not set, but a query per se. And within that, you can put variables in. So you can say, hey, I want to replace the table name, so that when you do use that snippet, so I think I have a select top 5 one. So I'm going to take that, put it in my snippets configuration, and now when I go to run a new query, I can just type SQL select top 5, or top 10, and it'll come up with my actual SQL command, and it will automatically highlight the table name. So I can straight away just type product, which I'm pretty sure what I do on this one. Copilot running in the background. You'll see the GitHub Copilot because I have that on my Azure Data Studio. It'll get out of the way in a minute. And then I'll type product, and it'll go ahead and let me do a select top 10 on product. So you can put any customizations you want in there, any snippets. So also when you're working across teams, that's just sitting in a SQL.json file. So you could create an entire set of snippets for your team and then just copy paste them around to the different team members, and they can use those features as well. Let's talk about widgets. What are widgets? If you've ever used Azure Data Studio, you can't see it on there, you'll see it in the next recording. But basically a widget is a little tile on the screen. Those tiles can be scoped at, say, a SQL instance level, at a database level, or even lower. Things that you might want to see in a widget: last known backups, slow running queries, the amount of space a table is using, or you might want to see the number of objects in your database. You can also customize these widgets and put whatever you like in them. So if I connect to my HH Pass demo and I hit manage, I'm going to get like a dashboard screen. That dashboard screen, all the tiles on that screen are widgets. So there's a number of them out of the box. Last space used a space used by table is one of those. But I can then go in to the user snippet, the user configuration for the dashboard widget. It's like a mind meld with all the different names. And I can customize that widget to do something else. So I often customize the widgets to say, I want to know the last known backup for all my databases, because it's a query I usually run every so often anyway. So you go back into that command palette for the user settings. You go see the dashboard one. Good old typos in my recording. And I go into the database widgets, because it's going to be at the database level that I want to see this. And it's all defined in JSON. I can simply plonk my JSON in there, so you see the slow queries one, you see the space used one. I put mine in at the end, and then it'll save, and open up the connection, and I can go look at widgets. So Azure Data Studio lets you do the standard stuff. You can run a query, you can look at the properties of a database, you can put extensions on to look at agent jobs. And I must say, when you do look at agent jobs within Azure Data Studio, it's a much nicer interface to an extent than SSMS. So when you're in SSMS and you're looking at SQL agent jobs, you just see these listed job names, their last status level, and when they last run and when they're next going to run. There's extensions within Azure Data Studio that when you're looking at SQL agent, they're going to show the list of jobs, and you have the filtering capability and the sort capability. But next to it's going to be this nice little graph of green and red over time, telling you whether it was success or failed over time. And then you can go in and look at the properties even further. And the two tools allow you to switch between them. So there are times where you're in Azure Data Studio and there's a feature that is not there, and it'll say open in SSMS. In the same way, if you're in SSMS and there's something that you can do in Azure Data Studio, SSMS will say open in Azure Data Studio. So you can go between the two tools as well. And for those of you thinking SSMS is going to die, wrong, it's not. It's not going away. There's functionality within SSMS that is upvoted to the wazoo on the forums, and it's not happening, which is analysis services. Everyone wants Azure Data Studio to connect to analysis services. It's not there. So if you're using things like tabular models or multidimensional, you can't use Azure Data Studio with them. SSIS is another one. You can't see the integration services catalog so nicely, but SQL is fine. Let's talk about extensions. Extensions, there's a number of them published by Microsoft. There's also a number of them published by the product team, sort of pseudo-independently, and there's a number published by the public. The little I don't know what you call it, almost like Lego building blocks on the left-hand side menu nav is the extensions. So you can go through and add a series of extensions. And what I also like with extensions, similar to snippets, those extensions go into an app data local folder. So when you're moving between machines, you just copy the whole folder over between another machine and bring all your extensions with you. Or you can probably use Winget to automate them all. So my favorite ones are these. Schema Compare, GitHub Copilot, though GitHub Copilot sadly comes with a cost. I think it's 20 Aussie dollars a month or something. So it's probably a bit cheaper for the US and UK. SQL Agent is another one. SQL Server DAC Pack when you're working with database projects. But there's other things, there's a SQL assessment tool. There's one to give you shortcuts that you would have seen, keyboard shortcuts from SSMS inside Azure Data Studio. There's some to do wiki editing. You can use a lot of the Visual Studio Code extensions within Azure Data Studio because they are, under the hood, the same code base. By the way, the slides should be available to everyone. I don't know how, but I upload them to Sessionize and they somehow get to you. So if you miss anything, don't worry. They're accessible. But those extensions, you pretty much install them. They don't need a reboot, most of them. You install and they're there. A couple of them will say, hey, when you go to install it, it'll point you at a website. So poor man's T-SQL format, it'll take you over to a website that has a VSIX extension file. You download that. If you double click it, it'll try and open it in VS Code. Don't worry, you go into Azure Data Studio in the file menu and say install extension, point it at the VSIX file, and it will install it. And every so often, you might get an extension that goes in a bit of a tizzy, doesn't like itself. You can disable it, re-enable it, or uninstall, reinstall. Now, notebooks. So notebooks can be done in T-SQL and Python, probably other things since I put this slide deck together. But what it effectively is the combination of Markdown and SQL and results in the one file. So IPYNB file extension, you cannot open it in other products. You can run command line against it to convert it to straight SQL, so if you want to drop the Markdown, and vice versa. But basically, you'll see in this that I've got a SQL kernel up the top. So notebooks or Jupyter notebooks generally are connected to Python and using Python engines and kernels, whereas Azure Data Studio is the only one that recognizes the SQL kernel. So I can say I'm going to use the SQL kernel and I'm going to connect it to my instance, in this case my local one, and then I can do any sort of markdown, which is text, so you can put documentation, you can put pictures, you can put hyperlinks, and then I can have cells of code. Now I can have repeated cells of code, and those cells can interface with each other. So if we look at this next one, you'll see that I'm running a SQL command up the top on the right, and I'm putting stuff into a temp table called hire. Not a good naming convention at all. And then in the next cell, I'm actually selecting from that temp in the secondary cell. So I'm not using the same cell, but I'm able to reference previously run things. Something to be very much aware of when you're using notebooks, the results stay in the file. So if I save this file, those results are now in there, which means the data is now in there. So when you're sending this between people, if you're working with notebooks, always clear the results first, especially if you're checking this into Git and you don't want the data in Git because you have to rebase your repo. But a notebook allows you to not only have the markdown and the code, but the results with it. So academic people love these because they can do their hypothesis theory work, have the results saved at the time they were doing their analysis. Troubleshooting is what this is really good for. Troubleshooting and training. Generally speaking, day to day, I don't see a lot of people using notebooks, but I do see it for support teams who are constantly getting users going, hey, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. They have pre-set up notebooks. They send those to a user and say, run this and send me back the file. And now you can see exactly what happened for the user. You can see the results as they did. So you'll be able to troubleshoot a little bit better. And a cool feature with SQL Server is you can schedule a notebook to run on a schedule. So if you're looking at doing things like maintenance planning, or you're looking at capacity management, you might have a notebook that you deploy to a SQL Server on-prem, and you run that notebook on a schedule and you can see the results. The other one's GitHub Copilot. So I realize this is a paywall thing compared to everything else because that's free, but GitHub Copilot became available with version 1.44 and above with the GitHub Copilot extension. And what that lets you do, and hopefully this video just plays behind the scenes, but let me just check, because I added this one late. Nope, it's going to do that. I'll see what it does. Although, it's not even going to do it. Hang on, let me just change it out and do this. So this, is not on your screen. This is Azure Data Studio. So, fun fact, because we have time, and if anyone has questions, now's the time to raise your hand and ask. So Azure Data Studio has a cool thing that SSMS doesn't. SSMS only lets you zoom in and out on the results. Azure Data Studio lets me zoom in and out on the full window. So I can go in and look at things in big text. You know, for those days when you're very tired or long nights doing support work, you can zoom in. You don't have to chuck the glasses on. You just zoom in. And you can zoom out. Now, I wish this was in duplicate mode. Let me see if I can switch my computer to duplicate. Probably won't like me. I'll test it. Stand by. Says it's in duplicate. Hey, now I can see it somewhere here. You can. Cool. So let's just grab a query window here. Let's minus this. So what you'll notice is as I type, you get the IntelliSense, which is cool, but you'll see this other thing appearing in the background. Notice how there's like this little grey subtle text? That's GitHub Copilot. And the advantage I have, the database I'm connected to is AdventureWorks. GitHub Copilot does not access your data. It does not know about your database schema and structure. No. But what it can do is it knows about the publicly accessible information. So AdventureWorks is out there documented for the world, which is why it can tell me things like, hey, did you want to search for category ID or product ID? Or if I'm doing like joins, it will start to say, hey, you know, with that join, let's see if we got like sales or something. What is in this database? Categories. And it should, too quick. See how it can automatically tell me what the join's going to be? Let me zoom in for you. So you've got that cool feature, and all I have to do is hit tab to accept what it says. And I can keep going. So GitHub Copilot, like all the other Copilots, it's not autopilot, it's it's there to help you. So it's for me, it's just a performance efficiency thing, because it'll come up with suggestions. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Tab and continue on. But otherwise, can't do it. Something else that you can do that I haven't shown. Column select, yep, standard feature. Who loves a ragged edge? Yeah. You can hit the end key, and now I'm at the other end. When you've got colleagues who prefer commas at the end, so let's say we've got, yep, cool, let's do that, and do that. And we go, yeah, I don't like the comma at the end. You just go to the end, delete. Well, I won't do it on that bottom one, but delete, and then you can hit home again, and then go forward and put the comma back in on the front. So I love doing that sort of stuff. Or if you've got something that's all one line and you need to like put it on multiples and stuff, you can sit there and do column select and go across. Like I just want to go one word across. So I can do shift control and arrow and move one word across. So I love the fact that Azure Data Studio can handle that ragged edge and I can move things around. If you've got like a query in all one line, you're like, no, we just put enter and now it's in the down, column view. But yeah, it's super, super cool. All the different things you can do. It's fast to load. It's got all the extensions there. You've got that terminal window there. You can also have all the history, so I can have a terminal window and do things like get AD user and it's going to error, but I can go run PowerShell commands, I can connect to Azure, I can run CLI, and all that fun stuff. But we are at time, so hopefully gave you a brief overview of all the things that are in Azure Data Studio. Feel free to ask me questions. Do fill out the survey if you can. That would be appreciated. And thank you.